Om Jnanatimirandhasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so we'll begin then. As I said, how do I put it? As somebody trying to practice Bhakti Yoga, I love the festival season. But as a Bhakti-śāstrī teacher, I hate it because our classes are always half full. So yeah, we will be having another reduced class today. A few people have messaged me. Again, the problem is normally if people message me, I can chastise them, but they all have valid excuses in festival periods. So I can't even tell them off. So yeah, so just as a heads up, we'll be having a slightly reduced class. I've changed the activities to be a bit more suited for a small group. With cognizance of that. So, as I said, we're continuing on. We're finishing the 11th chapter today, which is very fun. The 11th chapter is relatively long. It's been a while, I think, since we've gotten into the 50s. And I think the ending is actually the essence of the 11th chapter. And that's what I was referencing to before. Before I continue with the content, I hate to do a recap, but we've missed one weekend. And so because of that, I think it'd be good just to refresh our knowledge. So does anyone have any general points that they remember? And then I'll be very cruel and ask specific questions. What have people remembered so far from the 11th chapter? What are we up to so far? I guess that would be a good way of framing. What have we seen so far in the 11th chapter? And as I said, I like awkward silences. We've got a small class, so I also don't have to worry about activities going for a while, so I'm happy to embrace the awkward silence until somebody says something.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I can only think about the pictures, Prabhu.
Jai, but what? No, this is why I made you do the pictures. What did you draw in your picture? What did we draw in the pictures?
Pictures. Sorry, one was so there are plenty of things, but we were able to see. I mean, Arjuna was seeing so many mouths, bellies, and those things, and people are going into Krishna's mouth. Like the rivers, or like those things like we have drawn. But yeah, there are multiple things I should start talking about.
No, but
what exactly?
With that point, it's very good, and I promise I'm not going to pick on you, even though you were the brave one to be the first to speak. But do you remember why was this form there with all the teeth and all the gnashing and all the terribleness? What was Krishna conveying? Because remember, we were talking about the universal form, right? The Vishvarupa, the Virat Rupa, right? But there was a specific aspect that was being demonstrated there. Do you remember which aspect that was?
It's the time aspect, Prabhu.
The time aspect, yes. And actually, Srila Prabhupada writes, I'm not sure which Acharya he got this from, because I don't think Baladev Vidyabhushan says it in his Pika, but Prabhupada writes, this is what makes this universal form unique. Because we know in Krishna, he's revealed his universal form before, right, in the Mahabharata. But that wasn't the full universal form because it was lacking the time aspect. So the time aspect is very significant because as we will read today, and I won't steal thunder for that point, but as we'll read today, Krishna says, oh, Arjuna, no one has seen this form before, right? You are the first to see it. And Prabhupada, he addresses this in the purport. I hope many of you will remember from reading the purports that Prabhupada says, when this is being said, this does not contradict what has already been established in the Mahabharata. Okay, so that was the time factor that was being revealed in that specific point. Now, how does Arjuna feel about the time factor? Who can tell me?
Astonished.
He was astonished.
He was astonished not about the time factor. He was-
Astonished about the Krishna's forms by seeing his universal form.
Yes, he was astonished by the universal form,
Yeah.
but when he started seeing the Kalarupa, that astonishment transformed into something else.
Fear.
What did it? Fear, exactly, right? So at that point, he became very afraid. Okay, that's another point. Now, another thing that I'll ask before we get in and finish this chapter, what is the purpose of manifesting this fearful Kalarupa? There's a few purposes we could say, but what was one specific purpose that was relevant to Arjuna? How did Arjuna benefit from seeing this Kalarupa?
I think it reestablishes the point which Krishna made, and actually reestablishes few points. One is, it says that we are not the body. You know, we are the spirit souls, and this body keep on sort of this is eventually going to decay and die. And part of it, Krishna, I think he's already said that whether that you become the nimitta matra, and he also showed him the all the Kauravas in that form where they get crushed, which means they're already, Krishna has already decided that is what is going to happen. So it is in a way, I wouldn't say word reassuring, it is just solidifying the Arjuna's faith, which is already solidified, just to make giving another dimension to it, that this is be firm on it and just do your duty. You know, just don't think you are the doer, just do as I say now. And that pretty much, Prabhu, like, because the war is going to be long and hard, and Arjuna didn't have a lot of time like we do, studying Bhakti-śāstrī over 2 years. And it's kind of solidifying, making him, just so he doesn't lose his feet. Because there's going to be tough decisions coming ahead, like tough things coming ahead, he would have to witness.
Yeah, coming very, very soon ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, Srikanta Sena Prabhu wants to add something.
So Prabhu, at the start, before Krishna reveals his form, he actually says, "I'm going to show you a form that no one's seen before." And we know that Krishna has shown his. So this is one of those issues where, Krishna is getting a number of birds with one stone. And so here it says, "I'm going to reveal to you a form which no one else has seen before." And he reveals to Krishna's the form of the Virat Rupa, which Yashoda Maya had seen already within his belly. So someone would argue, hey, what's going on here? But actually, he didn't show her the Kalarupa form, which is more fearsome and ghastly. And he showed that to Arjuna. And then additionally, in that process, he's showing them that the Kauravas have already been defeated by Krishna. He's already ended them here. He just simply needs to be an instrument for Krishna. And additionally, he's also for the people, because Arjuna is representing us, the general mass. He's also showing the general mass his potency and power as the Virat Rupa, as the maintainer of everything, the string on which all the pearls rest. And so there's a number of purposes, and there may be additional ones that perhaps Rohan probably will enlighten us on.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, Rohan has lowered his hand now. I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah.
Jai.
I think this was a question in a closed book exam, and I think Prabhupada mentions that it's because if someone claims to be Krishna in the future, it just like solidifies the foundation that no one else can do what Krishna has done doing the universal form. But I had a question on that actually. When Krishna gave the vision to Arjuna, did he give it to everyone else on the battlefield to see that form as well? Or is it only Arjuna that saw that?
Only Arjuna and certain demigods saw that, and other devotees. Prabhupada says that in the purport.
Doesn't that contradict the purpose of showing the universal form then?
So my understanding is that the point of the universal form wasn't to prove to everyone that Krishna is God. He's proving it to Arjuna, right? And the demigods with devotional eyes, they can also see that, right? The point that Krishna is making is he's trying to prove it to Arjuna, not to everyone. I would say that when Prabhupada's saying he's doing this to prove it to people and to the general masses, he's proving that to people who have the adhikar to sort of see that. It's not that Krishna needs to verify it to everyone, right? You even see this like in Kamsa's arena. When they're in Kamsa's arena, what do people see? They see death personified, they see their relative, they see this, they see that, right? They see all of these different things, and that's not particularly an issue. Can Sanjaya also see the universal form? I haven't read any reference if he does, if he can or can't, so I wouldn't know. I would need to ask. I'll maybe ask someone and get back to you. But yeah, I haven't read any reference saying that. The only references, Prabhupada seems to generically say anyone who had the devotional eyes to see it, and different acharyas will say the demigods were one of that group. Maybe there's other people as well. Prabhupada seems to leave it broad and vague. Yeah, I'd have to see. I think Baladev Vidyabhushan, I don't think mentions that, neither does Chakravarti Thakur. But I'd have to check like Sridhar Swami, you know. But coming back to Rohan's point, is that Krishna, he is proving this to Arjuna. It's not that the point is that he wants to prove it to everyone. He's proving it to people who are receiving the knowledge of the Bhagavad-gītā, and therefore he's revealing it to Arjuna. And he'll say that later on, right? He'll say that as we finish this chapter, that you can only see this form, not through study of the Vedas, not through austerities. You can only see this through bhakti, right? So that's a point that Krishna is making. And then he says that's even more true of the two-armed form. But the whole point is that he's verifying it to somebody who wishes to understand this. He's not just by and large trying to prove it. He's showing the standard that needs to be given for somebody who is God, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Prabhu, one more. When you find out about Sanjaya, maybe also you did like if barbaric site as well.
Yeah, see, I'm not sure about individuals. I couldn't tell you. All I can say of what I've read is that Prabhupada says that it was anyone who was a devotee at the time and was positioned in such a way that they could perceive it, could perceive it. I wouldn't be able to tell you who did and who didn't. Maybe Madhavacharya or some other acharya has written in the Mahabharata commentary or something, but I haven't read those books. So yeah, in terms of the Gita commentaries that I've read in recent memory, I don't think any specify, but I can go over again for all of you, and I'll check some of the other commentaries. I don't normally read so much, and I'll also ask some. I'll ask some of my senior godbrothers.
Yeah, it's probably like, I think with Sanjaya seeing it, like from our vision, we can only make it by inference. Like 1150, he says, oh, the Supreme Personality then displayed his real four-arm form, and then last he showed his two-arm form. Like,
yeah, and I was just about to say, Sanjaya describes the universal form, so he's quite clearly seeing it. That just clicked in my head. Sorry, that was a bit of a slow moment. Sanjaya is definitely seeing it, but I was thrown off about trying to find a specific reference. Sanjaya has to see it because he's describing it, right? How else could he be describing it? So Sanjaya is definitely seeing it, but other personalities I wouldn't know. I'll try and find some other references for specific points. Sorry to cut in Srikanta Sena Prabhu. I think all the brahmacharis are a little bit sick, so I've picked up the I think I've picked up the cold from them. But yeah, no, at least some would say that he's saying what Arjuna is saying. Yeah, maybe some could, but if we go to the text, I'm pretty sure it straight up says Sanjaya Uvacha, and then he starts describing it. Let me just. Yeah, so in text 9. Yeah, because well, Sanjaya is saying, Arjuna saw in that form. He's saying what Arjuna saw in the form. So yeah, you could say, but what I would say, just logically, it would be a little bit weird that Sanjaya somehow can read Arjuna's mind and not see what Arjuna's seeing, if you get what I mean. Like Sanjaya isn't the reader of all minds, he's the seer of all things, if that makes sense. But then, again, that's my, Prabhupada calls it scriptural speculation as compared to mental speculation. My scriptural speculation is that Sanjaya could see it. I'd need to go back and check the commentaries to give a specific reference, but it wouldn't make sense to me that Sanjaya couldn't see it. How else would he describe it? As for other personalities, though, I would need to, I'd need to check. Normally the comments are pretty vague. At the most, you'll hear that many demigods saw it. Because of course the demigods are all, they're all devotees to some degree. Okay, are there any other questions? Because then I still have a few more points to make about the universal form before we resume our discussion. Okay, I have a few more questions to ask, but I just wanted to make the point. He's showing the Kalarupa because he's trying to show Arjuna these people are all dead, right? They're all dead already. You are afraid of this activity. Actually, they're all dead as a result of their sinful actions. And that's why we hear, what does Krishna describe it as? I don't know who did this drawing of how they're going in like moths to the flame. I think that was Sevamrita Mataji and her group, wasn't it? Because I remember they did some sort of metaphorical flame, unless I'm getting mixed up. But anyways, like moths to the flame, right? Just running towards it, just flying into it. Why? Because it's a result of their sinful activities. They've so willfully done their sinful activities, and so therefore they're basically like a moth to the flame, just eagerly running to their own demise. Okay, and because of that, Arjuna does not need to feel brokenhearted about this, because he's simply an instrument in Krishna's desire. They've already been killed. Actually, Srimad Bhagavatam, you might remember, I mentioned this 2 weeks ago. Srimad Bhagavatam describes that when Arjuna told Krishna to ride the chariot, just by Krishna glancing at all the other side, he reduced all of their lifespans. So already they've all been killed in Krishna. So this is the one specific point of manifesting the Kalarupa for Arjuna's, I wouldn't say pleasure, but for his sake. Okay, now my final question, and then we will continue on reading Bhagavad-gītā. My final question is the Kalarupa, is the Vishwarupa, is this universal form? Is this a material or is it a spiritual form?
That's a material form, Prabhu. It's temporary.
Yeah, does anyone agree? Does anyone disagree?
Yeah, it's a conceptual form, Prabhu, material. It's not really in the spiritual world.
It's interesting because Prabhupada says both. Prabhupada, in the beginning of the chapter, he says it's a spiritual form. At the end of the chapter, he describes it as a material form, right? And so it's a little bit confusing because it's almost a tatastha form in that sense, right? It has some of the aspects of a spiritual form and some of the aspects of a material form. It is a spiritual form because it is directly Vishnu Tattva, right? It's not the universal form of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is describing a different universal form to this one. At least that's my understanding. This universal form is directly Vishnu Tattva. Its body is composed of Satchidananda, right? However, it is considered material in the sense that it is temporary, because it only manifests when the universe manifests. And when the universe is no longer manifested, it becomes an unmanifest form. And in that sense, it is material because it dwells in the material universe. But it is non-material in the sense that it is composed of material objects in the same way that the universal form of Srimad Bhagavatam is. We all know Srimad Bhagavatam, it talks about, the trees, and the trees are I always mix it up. I think the mountains are the spine, the trees are the hair follicles, something like that, right? And that is slightly different. This form is directly transcendental for several reasons. One is also that many people are witnessing that material form in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but what are we hearing here? This is a very rare form to see, right? The form in the Srimad Bhagavatam is for the spiritualist who can't meditate properly and needs a help. Whereas what do we hear about this universal form? Well, we're about to hear that it's very, very hard to see even for the studiers of the Vedas and everything. So it's not a beginner's thing, right? Whereas the form in the Bhagavatam is almost something for the beginner spiritualist. So to make that point, it is a distinct form to that one. It is spiritual, it is Vishnu Tattva. However, it can be considered material in the sense that it dwells in the material world, and it is temporary, like the material world. It is a temporary form, it's not an eternal form. Not like Jagannath, Gauranga Mahaprabhu, Krishna, Nrsimhadev. All of these forms exist in the spiritual world, and they reflect into our material world. This Virat Rupa, this Vishvarupa, it exists in our material world, and therefore is temporary but possible. Okay, I think those are the main points. As I said, there's so many points to discuss in anything with the Bhagavad-gītā, and I don't want to fill Srikanta Sena Prabhu's prediction of me taking 2 hours to discuss one text. But so we'll go right into the text now, but I just wanted to rehash all of that because I think those are the important points for the 11th chapter that we should keep in mind. Okay, open up my Gita. Hopefully you'll have your Gitas with you. Okay, so does anyone remember which text we got up to last week? I mean, like a fortnight ago? I remember, I'm just seeing if we're all...
42?
46?
Yeah.
42 or 46?
46. It was... Now let's see if I actually did remember. I'm pretty sure. No, it was 42. It was 42. We discussed Hey Krishna, Hey Yadav, Hey Sakheti. And we said maybe Kirtanis need to do Bhakti-śāstrī because Arjuna is apologizing for saying this. But then of course we made the point that actually this is, even though Arjuna is apologizing, this reflects his elevated position, right? Okay, so then I reckon let's just go on to text 43. Maybe Rohan Prabhu can say the English. Pitasi lokasya chararasya tvamasya pujascha gurur gariyan natvatsamostya bhyadhika kutonyo lokatrayepya pratima prabhava. You are the father of this complete cosmic manifestation, the worshipable chief, the spiritual master. No one is equal to you, nor can anyone be one with you. Within the three worlds, you are immeasurable. Jai. So, here we are finding, thank you, Prabhu. So here we are finding a further description of Arjuna. As I said, contextually, what point do we reach up to? These are Arjuna's prayers, right? In response to seeing this universal form, right? And so we hear this majestic description, if we will. He's continuing his prayers, he's finished repenting, and now he's glorifying, okay? And in this glorification, well, we're hearing a description of what we already know, right? You are the father of the cosmic manifestation of the moving and the unmoving, right? All of these different things are described. Of course, being called a father is very interesting. Why? Because being the father places him in a higher position than Brahma, right? Brahma is often considered the father of all this world, but in this sense, we can understand that Krishna is also the father of Brahma, which is something we already know. Anyways, for the sake of time, let's keep on moving to text 44. Maybe Srikanta Sena Prabhu could read it out for us. While Srikanta Sena Prabhu reads it out, just keep in mind that at this point, our acharyas say that Arjuna falls to the ground in prostration. Tasmat pranamya pranidhaya kayam prasadaye tvam ahamisham nidyam piteva putrasya sakheva sakyuhu priya priyaya harsi deva shodhum.
You are the Supreme Lord, to be worshipped by every living being. Thus I fall down to offer you my respectful obeisances and ask your mercy. As a father tolerates the impudence of his son, a friend the impertinence of a friend, or a husband the familiarity of his wife, please tolerate the wrongs I may have done you. Jai. Jai, Jai. And what's very interesting in here, at least I think it's interesting, is that he mentions a few different moods in there. What are the moods that we might notice? Prabhupada points them out in the purport. This is just a little teaser for Nectar of Devotion. It's not a major point. But what are the different ways that he's saying you can relate to?
I mean, it's straight up in the translation. You don't need to, it's not too complicated. What are the relationships he points out?
Sakya is like friendship.
Yes, so he says, a friend, the impertinence of a friend. What does he say before then? A father tolerates the impudence of his son. And what's the last one?
A husband, the familiarity of his wife.
Yes. So, in this way, we understand. In this way, we understand some reference, right, of the different rasas, okay? As I said, this is a little Nectar of Devotion teaser. We won't go into it, but I sometimes like to show how all these shastras are connected. My biggest dilemma when Kanisham Prabhu asked me to teach Bhakti-śāstrī is what order I'll teach the books in. I was really in a pickle whether we should start with Nectar of Devotion or whether we should start with Bhagavad-gītā. I ended up choosing to start with Bhagavad-gītā because people are often most excited to study Bhagavad-gītā. Obviously, we're excited to study Shastra, but there's something exciting about Gita for most people. But in many ways, I would recommend all of you to reread all of these books after we finish Bhakti-śāstrī, because you'll see they all intertwine and they all connect, right? Especially this 11th chapter and a few other chapters are very dependent on Nectar of Devotion in order to understand the moods that Arjuna is experiencing. All of this science of how he is responding to Krishna's statements, to Krishna's revelations, are all synthesized and analyzed rather in the Nectar of Devotion. But anyways, this is not a very complex part of Nectar of Devotion. This is very foundational. Here we have the different rasas. And I want to point this out just to say that when we discuss these rasas, we're not making them up. These are established rasas that are there present in the texts. When we study Nectar of Devotion, we'll see the same thing. The whole rasa theory is being pulled out of Srimad Bhagavatam and of course Bhagavad-gītā. So we find there the three main rasas, okay? Sakya, Vatsalya. Vatsalya is of course the parental one, and Madhurya, which is of course the wife. Okay, so in this way we're seeing some presence of it. Anyways, we'll keep on going on to text 45. And maybe we can have Vishaka Mataji read out the English. Adrishta purvam hishitosmi drishtva bhayena cha pravyathitam mano me tadeva me darshaya deva rupam prasida devesha jagannivasa.
After seeing this universal form, which I have never seen before, I am gladdened. At the same time, my mind is disturbed with fear. Therefore, please bestow your grace upon me and reveal again your form as a personality of Godhead. O Lord of Lords, O abode of the universe.
Jai. Thank you, thank you. So I moved on to the next slide, which is relevant to text 46, but that's because now we are finally moving in to, I would say, the peak now of the 11th chapter. I said this earlier. Often again, we feel, what do we feel that the peak of the 11th chapter is? It's when we're seeing gnashing of teeth, we're seeing this big cosmic form, thousands of heads, everything, right? This is what everyone thinks of when they think of the 11th chapter. But actually, the 11th chapter hits its peak, it hits its essence right at the end. And this end, I would say, begins in text 45. Text 45 to 55 is the essence of the 11th chapter. Okay? Because what is Arjuna requested? Vishaka Mataji has very nicely read it out. What is he saying?
He's disturbed by fear, so he wants Arjuna's original form. I mean, not Arjuna's, Krishna's original form.
Yes. He's asking for Krishna's original form. He's asking to see it once again, right? This is the response of the devotee to seeing the universal form. And therefore, we're hearing something higher. Because if one is able to see this form and yet still desires something else, they have not seen the fulfillment of their desires. They have not seen the fulfillment of all truth. Once one sees the absolute, then one doesn't want to see anything else, right? So we're seeing some indication as to the positioning of the universal form. Arjuna sees it, and then what does he ask? He sees to see the form as the personality of Godhead. And then he says, text 46. And then maybe we can have Jaswant Prabhu could say the English after I've said the Sanskrit. Kiritinam gadinam chakrahastam ichami tvam drashtum aham tathaiva Tenaiva rupena chaturbhujena sahasrabaho bhava vishvamurte.
O universal form, O thousand-armed Lord, I wish to see you in your four-armed form, with helmeted head, with club wheel, conch, and lotus flower in your hands. I long to see you in that form.
So here we're finding something interesting. Who can tell me what's interesting about Arjuna's request here?
Requesting to see the Vishnu form, not.
He's expecting. He wants to see some forearm form. What's going on here, right? We're expecting him to say, "I wish to see that form with the flute and the peacock feather." Why is he asking for this? There's some siddhanta in there. Before we go into that, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the four-armed form of Krishna. And so, who's confident? Who's confident to try recite the Sanskrit I've got here? It's from Srimad Bhagavatam, so it's a little bit harder. Let's see. Whoever tries, I'll give them a bonus mark in the shloka test. I won't actually, but please give it a go.
Sa vishmayot phula vilochano harim sutam vilokayana anakadundhubi tada Krishna Avataro Sava Sambharamo Sparshan Mudadavi Ji Bhayo Yutam Apulotu Gavam.
Jai, Jai, Jai. Very nice, very Unitarian. Oh, somebody said something in the chat. Oh, favorite name, Jai. Then maybe Shavina Mataji can say the English.
When Vasudeva saw his extraordinary son, his eyes were struck with wonder. In transcendental jubilation, he mentally collected 10,000 cows and distributed them among the Brahmanas as a transcendental festival. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. So why am I mentioning this text? I'm mentioning this text because I think we should discuss a little bit about the forms of Krishna, just a tiny bit. We've already discussed this a bit throughout, but I think it's particularly relevant here because we're hearing the demand for Krishna's forms. Now, if anyone has Bhagavatam with them or on their computer, they can quickly look up the word for word for this section, because there's one specific term that I wanted to point out. When Vasudeva saw his extraordinary son, okay, so this is Vasudeva seeing his son in prison, right? We're all familiar with this pastime. And what form is that? We've all seen the artwork. Krishna Avatara, yes. Very good point. So we're seeing that this form is coming up here, but what is the description we see in paintings and everything? What do we see when Krishna has appeared? What does he look like? Narayan, right? He has four arms, right, when he appears. And so we're seeing the four-armed form is coming. Now, this isn't Narayan technically. Narayan is a lower form than the four-armed form of Krishna. The four-armed form of Krishna is an Aishvarya form of Krishna. It's not the original form, but it is a form of Krishna. And the reason now why I've mentioned this text is exactly what Srikanta Sena Prabhu has pointed out. Krishna Avatara, or rather Avatarotsava, but Krishna Avatara, right? This form is described as Krishna Avatar. So Krishna Avatar means what? Krishna, in one sense, he is an avatar, but by and large, he is avatari, right? Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. This is one of those famous texts, right? We all know it. Krishna, he is the original form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This form here in the prison is described as Krishna Avatar for the reason that it is an expansion of Krishna. This four-armed form is not the original Krishna, it is an expansion of him. Okay? Now, there's a few reasons why we might wonder, why is this form being shown? The reason why, at least, that I think is the most fundamental is Arjuna is showing us. Arjuna is showing us the natural transition through forms of the Supreme Lord. First, he's seeing this infinitely opulent universal form, okay? He's seeing it there exploding. And what are we seeing? We're seeing all of the tattva, right? Why is this form being shown? We know jnana and vijnana. What is jnana and vijnana? Who can tell me? What is the distinction between the two?
Jnana is knowing and vijnana is realizing.
Exactly, right? So we've had the jnana of aham sarvasya prabhavo, right? We've had the jnana of all of these things, but in this 11th chapter, Krishna is giving the big jnana, right? He's giving the direct realization. See, everything is on me, right? I am throughout everything. Everything is being created and destroyed within me, okay? So Krishna has given the vijnana of the tattva, right? Of the fullness of Aishvarya. He's given the vijnana, the realization of it. But if one has the proper realization of it, then naturally they will come to realize not just that the Lord is providing for the whole world, not just that the Lord is pervading through the whole world, but they will also come to realize that the Lord exists in of himself. The Lord does not just exist pervading within our reality, but within himself he exists. But they will understand this in terms of Aishvarya, right? And therefore we have the four-armed form. The natural response, right, is that. And we'll come back to this a little bit later, because I think it becomes most complete when we hear about the two-armed form a little bit later. But I just want to make this point now so we don't get confused. He's asking this because this is a very Aishvarya form. And he is transitioning from having the direct realization of the, I would say, the most material Aishvarya form, right? It's showing a little, it's almost like a darshan ladder. We have the yoga ladder. This is the darshan ladder. Okay. So therefore, he's asking to see this form. Maybe then we can have Alex Prabhu can say the English of text 47. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya prasannena tavarjunedam rupam param darshitam atma yogat tejomayam vishwamanantamadyam yanme tvadanyena nadrishta purvam. Alex, I think you're muted, or at least I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Alex? I think there's some problem with the microphone. Okay, while Alex fixes that, let's have Sri Mataji say the English.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, happily have I shown you, by my internal potency, this supreme universal form within the material world. No one before you has ever seen this primal form, unlimited and full of glaring effulgence."
Yeah. So here we're finding the point. Here, Krishna, he is describing this universal form, right? So he's talking about how no one has seen it. This is coming back to the questions we were having right at the beginning. You'll see in the purport, I have it right up here. Srila Prabhupada, he writes, other devotees in the heavenly planets and in other planets in outer space could also see it. They had not seen it before, but because of Arjuna, they were also able to see it. In other words, all the disciplic devotees of the Lord could see the universal form which was shown to Arjuna by the mercy of Krishna. So this is the purport that we've been revolving around with all of our discussions of who actually saw this. So in your notes, if this is a question that really sticks with you, maybe highlight that or note it down, because this would be the main place. And then, of course, this is where Prabhupada discusses how Duryodhana saw this universal form as well, but this is not that same universal form, right? Because it was lacking the Kalarupa. Okay, so we're hearing all of that. And so what are we hearing? We're hearing about this. Krishna is almost confused. He's almost got whiplash, right? He's saying, you asked Arjuna, now why are you asking not to see this anymore? You're asking to see this rare form which no one else has seen. And yet you're asking now not to see it? I'm a little bit confused. So Krishna, he's almost, he's a hint confused by this request. But anyways, he goes on to describe something. And what does he describe? We will hear from Shivam Prabhu, who can say the English after I've recited the Sanskrit. na veda yagyadhyayanair na danair na cha priyabhir na tapobhir ugrahi evam rupa shakya aham driloke drashtum tvadanyena kuru pravira.
O best of the Guru warriors, no one before you has ever seen this universal form of mine, for neither by studying the Vedas, nor by performing sacrifices, nor by charity, nor by pious activities, nor by severe penances, can I be seen in this form in the material world.
Okay. So now we're hearing again, we will have a little activity based on these a little bit later, I think. Let's see. But I want to ask all of you, can anyone think, what is this, what concept is this referencing to? A concept that maybe I've hit you all over the head with a little too much in module 1. What will this remind us of? It's a thing we can't escape from. No matter how hard we try to run into the Bhagavad-gītā, we can't escape this thing. What is it? It's in text 48.
Is it that there is no way to see that form unless Krishna shows by himself?
Yeah, and there's a little concept though. Krishna, he is saying all the ways that you can't see this form, even the universal form.
So he's saying that even with the Jnana Yoga, the Astanga, any form of other yogas, you cannot see this form.
Exactly, right? It is the yoga ladder, okay? So in case all of you thought we're done with the yoga ladder, no, we'll never escape the yoga ladder, okay? The yoga ladder is essential. I think I told all of you this in module 1. If I ever wrote a study guide for the Bhagavad-gītā, I would call it climbing the yoga ladder, right? Because it is so key to understanding the whole Gita. Even in the universal form, we can't escape it, right? And so in this text, we're seeing a little bit of a reference back. And again, in case anyone wants to accuse the devotees of reading too much into the Gita, we're saying a conclusion that isn't there. Look at the Sanskrit there. It's very, very clear, right? All of these methods don't let one have darshan of this form, and therefore they are not complete or supreme methods, okay? Srila Prabhupada, he gives nice elaboration of all of these in the purports. He also makes a point that the divine vision is connected to the demigods, which is why that's the general interpretation I tend to when I discuss the divine vision of the universal form. Okay, let's move on to text 49. And maybe we can, if we had Shivam, let's have Runal Mataji then say the English for text 49. Mate vyatha ma cha vimudha bhavo drishtva rupam ghoram idrin mamedam vyakte tadhihi pritagmana punastvam tadeva me rupam idam prapasya.
You have been perturbed and bewildered by seeing this horrible feature of mine. Now let it be finished. My devotee, be free again from all disturbances. With a peaceful mind, you can now see the form you desire. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So now we're hearing that Krishna, he is transitioning now to actually show that form. This whole time, the universal form was still being shown, okay? We're now going to discuss text 50, where Sanjaya describes the transition of the form, okay? So let's just go straight to text 50 then, and maybe we can have, who have I not asked? Vidhi Mataji I have not asked. Vidhi Mataji can say the English. Sanjaya uvacha ityarjunam vasudevas tathoktva svakam rupam darshayamasa bhuyaha ashvasayamasa cha bhitam menam bhutva punah saumya vapur mahatma.
Sanjaya said to Dhritarashtra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, having spoken thus to Arjuna, displayed his four-armed form and at last showed his two-armed form, thus encouraging the fearful Arjuna.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mataji. So at the risk of spending too long in this text, we won't, but I have a few slides to discuss this, because I think here we're finding, again, in these final few texts, we're finding the essence of the Gita's message, okay? Or at least the essence of the 11th chapter's message. So what we've heard so far is we've heard what is Krishna saying? Oh, this terrible form of mine, right? You don't need to see it anymore. I will show you the form you are desiring to see. And yet, we are hearing something that is contradicting the desire that Arjuna expressed. Okay? Once we finish discussing this point, we'll have our break. Don't worry. So who can tell me, what is the issue here? We are hearing in text 50 what Krishna is manifesting. What is the issue with this in comparison to what Arjuna requested to see? So Arjuna, what did he request to see? We discussed it for a little bit, right? He wanted to see that, you know, the forearm form, right? Now, what is the issue when we read text 50?
You showed his two-arm form instead?
Yes. Well, he showed his forearm form and then he showed his two-arm form, right? It is almost like the forearm form is like a pit stop, right? And then he's instantly going to the two-arm form. So we can see here that Krishna, he's understanding the internal mood of Arjuna. Arjuna is asking to see this forearm form because of that natural transition of forms. But he is not asking to see it because it's actually the desire of his heart. The desire of his heart is to see the two-armed sweet form of Krishna. Now, I'm going to, this might be a little bit dry for some of you, but if we go into the word for word, who can tell me what is the word for the two-armed form?
Soumya Vapu.
And what is it saying?
It's the beautiful form.
The beautiful form. But that doesn't say two-armed. But Prabhupada, he has written two-armed form in the translation, right? So that's a good guess. But who can find me the Sanskrit word for the two-armed form?
Bhuya.
Bhuya. Where do you find Bhuya? But what does the word for it say? It says again. So that's a very good guess. I'm being a little bit cruel. There is no word. This is a trick question. Rohan Prabhu is right. I'm being very cruel to everyone. This is absolutely a trick question. And the reason why I'm asking it is because this will be one place where people might not attack Prabhupada's translation, but rather this is one place where we need to think a little deeper into the text. Where is Srila Prabhupada getting two-armed form from, right? Where is he getting it from?
Swakam Rupam Prabhu.
Sorry?
Swakam Rupam, his own form.
Swakam Rupam, but Swakam Rupam is what's shown first, which would seem to be the four-armed form. But you're very close, Mataji. This is another cruelty of mine that I've made you look for the word that's not explicitly there, right? Now, why do we get the conclusion that he has shown the two-armed form? Where do we get this conclusion from? If in the Sanskrit, what are we hearing? We're hearing about the Saumya Vapuhu, right? We're hearing about this form, but we're not hearing about a two-armed form, right? So where do we get this from? We get this from a few logical conclusions. Firstly, we should say that this is not describing again the universal form. Some people will sometimes say all of these descriptions carrying on are not describing the two-armed form. The remainder of this chapter is describing the universal form. This would not make sense, right? Because what have we already heard? Ekang Shena Sthito Jagat, right? So that form which is pervading this whole world is only a fragment of Krishna's potency, right? So when he says, as Mataji very nicely pointed out, the original form, it can't be that form, right? Because the original form wouldn't just be Ekankshena, right? It wouldn't just be one fragment. So it can't be that. So naturally, we would assume this is the four-armed form, and we would be correct in assuming that. Why? Because Arjuna has asked to see the four-armed form, right? He's asked to see it just a few texts earlier. And so we see that he manifests his original form. However, where do we get the idea that he then manifests a separate form? This is what I have in the second point on the slide here, right? Because in line 2, as Srikanta Sena Prabhu pointed out, Sanjaya says, bhuyaha, right? And what does bhuyaha mean? It means again, right? So a bhuyaha means he is again showing a form, right? So that means he's changed. However, in text 4, and as I warned, this is a bit linguistically heavy, so this might be a bit dry for us, but in text 4, we hear bhutva punaha, right? Becoming again. And then we hear about the Samya Vapur, right? Samya Vapur Mahatma. So what are we hearing here? He is becoming the Svakam Rupam, and then he is again becoming the Samya Vapur. None of this would make sense if there weren't 2 forms being described here. Why would Sanjaya say again twice, right? There's no poetic license for this. This would be weird. Why is he saying, again, he took on this form? And of course, it makes sense that we say, again, he took on the form, because throughout Krishna's pastimes, he is regularly manifesting the forearm, 2-arm form. It's only in Goloka and in Raj pastimes where Krishna is always in his 2-arm form, not manifesting his mystical potencies. So it makes sense that he says again, right? So the first again, bhuyaha, right? Bhuyaha means he is fulfilling that desire, right? But we're hearing svakam rupam, right? We're not hearing saumya vapuhu, right? The beautiful form. It's pretty well established that the most beautiful form is the 2-armed form, as we will hear slight further descriptions about as we conclude this chapter after our break. So because of this, it's a rather strong logical inference that we're first seeing the 4-armed form, and then we're seeing another form. And if the other form is another form, which is described as the beautiful form, and when we hear the descriptions about it later, are described as very human-like, that this would be the 2-armed form. So in that sense, Srikanta Sena Prabhu and Katyayani Mataji were very correct, right? In saying that it is because of Svakam Rupam and it is because of Bhuyaha that we are hearing that this is the 2-armed form, right? But it's an inference from them. Again, that's why Srila Prabhupada has given the word for it. We can study the word for it, and the translation pulls out the layers of meaning, right? If we were to translate this hyper-literally, it would be confusing. We would hear, and again, he manifested his original form, and again, he manifested his beautiful form, right? Then we wouldn't be getting the Gita as it is, we would be getting the Gita as it's very confusing, right? But what we're getting instead is a Gita as it is. So Srila Prabhupada, he has pulled all of this logic out, and that is how we can understand that it is the 4-armed form, and then it is the 2-armed form. Okay, with that bit of Sanskrit to boggle all your minds, I think let's have our 5-minute break. Let's meet again at, let's say 11:09. Okay, Hare Krishna. I'll see you all then. Okay, so we were discussing that. I think I had something else. Yeah, so there we go. And this is what I was referring to earlier, and I'm elaborating on it a little bit more. I realized I haven't added the diacritics, but I'm sure we can all read in between the lines and know that this is Vishwarupa, this is Aishwarya and all. But my apologies. When I send you guys these slides, I'll make sure that I put the diacritics on these. I just seem to have missed a slide. So this was the point I was making earlier. There is a deep siddhanta being shown in the fact that Arjuna desires to see the 4-armed form before he sees the 2-armed form, right? Because it's showing this progression. The Vishwarupa allows us to realize that, oh, there's a personal form that exists spiritually independent of this world, right? The most basic inference you can make is that God exists within this world, right? Like pervading this world. This is very basic and logical. Even in a sense, even the impersonalists believe in this, even though, yeah, whatever. So even the impersonalists can infer this, right? That there is divinity. Even the Mayavadis, to a degree, can infer this is not a very high realization. Not that Mayavadis can realize the Vishwarup. I want to make that point clear. But the general philosophy undergirding it is pretty intuitive, right? You can, I mean, not that many of you would, but if you talk to the average person who does like psychedelics and stuff, like the average They will tell you that, right? Some person who's just doing a lot of, psychoactive drugs, right? Even they can tell you that. It's not a very complex thing to realize that there is divinity pervading this world, right? We can intuit it, we can feel it, everything is alive, everything is dynamic. But to actually see the Vishwarup is something much higher than that. Again, I don't want to conflate the two, right? Mayavadis are not seeing the Vishwarup, as Krishna has already said, right? He's described the universal form, and what has he said about it? He said you could only see it through devotional service. You can't see it through Vedic recitation, this, and that, right? And Prabhupada has made that point in the purports. Only when the eyes, premanjana, right, are being covered in bhakti, only then one can see this form, right? So don't miss my point. But the point I'm trying to make is this form, what faith, what concept does it reinforce? It reinforces a very Aishwarya conception. Yeah. Then beyond that, we have the higher form, right? The Forearm Aishwarya form, right? And this is the form that I was saying earlier. This is a greater development of it. But then, even beyond that, we have the two-armed Madhurya form, and this is the infinitely sweet one. So again, this is the process we all need to go through. When you read Srila Prabhupada's Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada doesn't talk about anything about this four-armed form being an avatar or anything, right? I'm sure many of us read Krishna book in the build-up to Janmashtami, right? And when you read it in the build-up to Janmashtami, who can tell me? Does Krishna describe the two Krishnas? I mean, does Srila Prabhupada describe the two Krishnas? He doesn't. He doesn't really. He only talks about the one Krishna, right? The four-armed Krishna. But when Srila Prabhupada translates the Srimad Bhagavatam, then in that same section, he talks about how there are two Krishnas that are born, right? First, we should understand the four-armed Krishna. First, we should understand the opulent Krishna before we understand the sweet Krishna. This is a natural progression. And it's something we've already discussed. Again, we made this point in Chatur Shloki, but I'm just saying this point comes up again and again and again. Sometimes it can feel repetitive, but these points are repeated for a reason, right? It's the important points that are repeated. It's not the minor points. And what is the significance of this? Significance is that we don't run in to the human-like aspect of Krishna. We don't just rush in. Does that make sense? So, like this, we'll keep on going. So, we'll read text 51 then. Text 51, Damini Mataji decided to join us, so she can say the English for text 51. Arjuna uvacha drishtvedam manusham rupam tava somyam janardana idanim asmi samvrittaha sacheta prakritim gataha.
When Arjuna thus saw Krishna in his original form, he said, "O Janardana, seeing this human-like form, so very beautiful, I am now composed in mind, and I am restored to my original nature."
Jai. So we can see here, and thank you for reading, we can see here, Prabhupada makes this point. Again, we are trying to emphasize that this is the two-armed form, because it's not explicitly stated in the text. And Prabhupada, he makes this point in his purport here, right? What does he say? Here the words Manusham Rupam clearly indicate the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be originally two-handed. Does this make sense? So Manusham Rupam, what does this mean? Human, right? The human-like form. I mean, as much as I do on the average Sunday feast, wish I had four arms, I don't. And I think the average person also wishes on the average Sunday feast that they had four arms. And they also don't, right? When we're talking about a human-like form, we're talking about two arms, right? So this is very simple, straightforward. Again, it's not explicit in the text, but it's so heavily implicit, it may as well be explicit, right? It's almost like something that's so obvious you don't need to mention it, right? If a person's on fire and they say, get a fire extinguisher, you don't ask why, right? Because it's just obvious. It's just an obvious thing that's being stated. And this is almost what's happening here. We can see the discourse, right? Or rather, to use another example, if somebody ran up to somebody and say, get me a fire extinguisher, you don't think, oh, why would he be asking for a fire extinguisher? Just by hearing the discourse, just by hearing the conversation, we can understand very clearly that there is a fire somewhere, right? So it's the same with this. Even though it's not explicitly said, you don't need an explicit statement for something to be obvious. Sometimes things are even more obvious when they're implicit, and that is the situation here. And so therefore, we have the two-armed form being explicitly mentioned here. I might come back to make few points there, but I do want to do something interactive before before we all short circuit. So let's go on to text 52. And let's have, okay, I think I've asked everyone now, so maybe let's have Vidhi Mataji can say text 52. Shri Bhagavan-uvacha sudu darsham idam rupam drishtavana siyan mama deva apyasya rupasya nityam darshana kankshinaha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, this form of mine you are now seeing is very difficult to behold. Even the demigods are ever seeking the opportunity to see this form, which is so dear."
Okay, and then let's jump right over to text 53 as well. I want to do both of them at the same time. And maybe we can have then Srinivas Prabhu can say the English of text 53. Naham vedairna tapasa na danena na chejaya shakya evam vidho drashtum drishtavana simam yatha.
Translation: the form you are seeing with your transcendental eyes cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas, nor by undergoing serious penances, nor by charity, nor by worship. It is not by these means that one can see me as I am. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jai, thank you. So here we are hearing a few things. As I said, we will go through them now, but we're hearing some things which are rather interesting. Again, if this section was talking about the universal form again, Krishna would be so repetitive. This is exactly what we've heard already in text 48, right? That's why in the title here, you'll see I've written 1153 and 48. If the same thing was being described here, then this would be incredibly repetitive, Krishna, and not even repetitive in a sense where it's like sometimes he'll repeat bhakti twice in order to emphasize bhakti. He's literally saying the same thing twice, right? This doesn't make much sense. Quite clearly, we are discussing the higher two-armed form, okay? And again, when we discuss all of these things, what is being said, right? The form you are seeing with your transcendental eyes cannot be understood by studying Vedas, nor undergoing serious penances, nor this or that, right? It's the yoga ladder once again. Krishna has clearly described his original sweet form, the highest form. And what has he said? He can't have a single moment where he wants to give up the opportunity to say all of this can be achieved through bhakti and bhakti alone. Okay? The yoga ladder. We're always, if you're studying the Gita, you're always climbing it somehow or another, right? You can't run away from it. Okay, so just quickly, I want to go through for this slide. I know what's about to happen. It's going to do this. Let's just fill through. I want everyone just to chip in quickly. Just to quickly chip in, what are these qualifications? So you can only say one each. Let's start with text 48. So what are the disqualifications? What are the things that you cannot do in order to attain this according to text 48?
Giving charity.
So giving charity, okay? Giving charity, disqualified. And we'll see.
Sorry.
No,
Go on.
Okay. No, and we'll see this, right? People will have this idea all the time, right? I will be a good person and therefore I will see all of these things, right? I'm a very nice person. I'm building very many hospitals. And it's not that building hospitals is a bad thing, right? But this is not the means by which we see this, right? There's this, there's all of these sort of speculative philosophies that, if I'm a very, very nice person, then I will have darshan of the supreme form, right? But being nice is a material thing. It's a good thing. We try to be in the mode of goodness. And Bhakti-śāstrī Saraswati Thakur, he told his disciples, right? Especially his Grihastha disciples, when they wouldn't give money to beggars. He would say, what is the point of your bhakti if your heart is so hard? If your heart is so hard, rather, right? What is the point, right? So it's not that we dislike charity, but we should also realize that charity is a mundane good thing, right? Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates is a big, he's an atheist to all of my knowledge, and he does so much charity. Of course, I've heard some people criticize here or there, but whatever, insert whichever example you don't find offensive there, right? You'll find all sorts of atheists who are so charitable, right? So charity can be done, but it is not necessarily a spiritual qualification. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he discusses this. He talks about soft-heartedness, compassion, all of these qualities. And he says that for a devotee, devotees have all of these qualities, but they are not devotees because of those qualities, nor do they have devotion because of those qualities. Those qualities come as a side effect of devotion. We are not soft-hearted. We do not become devotees because we are soft-hearted. We become soft-hearted because we are devotees. And therefore, all of these things are achieved when one goes deeper into their bhakti. Okay, sometimes people will say all sorts of ideas. We should do this, we should do that. But all of this is actually misguided philosophy. You'll see it's very, very popular. Many missions exist in all sorts of religious groups, right? And their whole thing is, by building a hospital, we will get closer to God. By building a hospital, you'll be a good person. Again, it's nice for people to build hospitals, but you won't get closer to God, right? You'll get closer to goodness, but goodness is material. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's charity. Now I cut Srinivas Prabhu off very rudely. So Prabhu, which one were you going to say?
No, Prabhuji. It's saying it's performing sacrifices, but here we need to understand this performing sacrifices means it's not simply performing sacrifice, I would imagine, because the performing sacrifice is also part of the bhakti yoga and part of it could be only ritualistic practices as well. So that is my point, probably. Yes.
Yes. No, very good. And I fully agree. Especially we see in the word for word, Veda Yagya, right? And what do we hear about the Vedas, right? The majority of it are just this forest of confusion, right? Krishna has these heavy words for the majority of the Vedic rituals, right? But as you said, Yagya, I mean, Harinam Sankirtan Yagya, right? When we are chanting, we are engaging in sacrifice. So this is, of course, referring to ritualistic sacrifices or even sacrifices on the Jnana Marg, right? If one is doing all of these. Bhakti Yagya is a different thing, right? And then, of course, we'll hear, and I wasn't going to ask everyone, but it just flows nicely. We also have or Vedic study, right? Studying the Vedas. So studying the Vedas also, again, this applies primarily to speculative knowledge or even just knowledge attained from the Vedas. We will not obtain these things. In a sense, this can even refer to Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-gītā. I made this point a few weeks ago, I remember. I forgot someone asked about it. And even studying Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-gītā can be useless. It can just be sense gratification if we don't do it in service to the devotees. We should study Bhagavatam because Srila Prabhupada wanted us to study Bhagavatam. We should study Bhagavad-gītā because Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual master wants us to study Bhagavad-gītā. This is the reason why we wish to study, not because we wish to grow in our knowledge. If we wish to grow in our knowledge, then, maybe we'll learn a thing or two, but we will not have darshan of the Supreme Lord. And then it's just sense gratification. And the same thing with prasadam even. We can honor prasad and we can only have sense gratification. A little bit of a heavy point about what to do. This is the case. Unfortunately, it is the case that you can't do sense gratification with prasadam, right? Because if you're honoring it and you're not thinking, wow, I'm honoring the mercy of the Lord, then you're thinking, wow, this is really, really yummy. I have that. I don't like chickpeas so much, except for the black Indian chickpeas. I like those, but the white chickpeas you have in Australia, I really dislike them. And every time I see that somebody's cooked some sabji with them, I'll always sort of like go in the opposite direction. I'll go somewhere else. But actually, this is because I'm only on the sense gratification platform of engaging with prasadam, right? You'll see great sadhus. There's one pastime I won't get into just because it's already 11:30. But there's one sadhu described not in the Mahabharata, in one of the Puranas, and he would live, and he would take all of the sabji, he would take all the remnants of all of the great kings, all of the devotees and everything, all of the prasad that had been honored. He would take their remnants that had been thrown out in the bin, he would take it, he would mix it all together in a pot, and he would honor it. That would be his meal every day, right? This is the actual mood that we should be having prasad in, and he would relish it, right? Because it's the mercy of the Lord. Anyways, I'm not on that platform. So now you all know. Please make the black chickpeas for me, not the white ones. So okay, so studying the Vedas. Again, as Prabhu was saying, this refers mainly to the karma kanda, jnana kanda style activities, but it can even refer to bhakti kanda, or upasana kanda, if we are not doing it in a way that is in the mood of service. If we're doing it because it's fun, because we enjoy it. And of course, don't feel bad. Like I enjoy studying Shastra. It's something that I find fun, right? You're not going to be anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhyanavritam on your first day of bhakti yoga, right? But as long as you keep it in mind, right? Until you are on that platform, you won't have darshan of Krishna. Sometimes we hear these heavy things and we get discouraged. But we shouldn't get discouraged. That's just to tell us what the goal is. The expectation is that we're not yet there on that platform, right? People get discouraged. They'll hear Krishna say, unless one has full faith, they won't be able to get the result. And then they'll think, oh, sometimes I don't have full faith. Sometimes I think maybe Krishna, maybe Krishna doesn't care, or, something like this. Maybe bhakti isn't so perfect, right? And we'll have doubts like that bubbling up, and we'll think, oh, then I won't have any achievement. But we don't realize that Krishna, literally afterwards, he'll say that person who only has the desire to serve me can achieve this, right? We don't get discouraged by that either, because we should think when I'm on that platform, then I will achieve these things. These are goals, not expectations. And we can become really, really nasty in our own Krishna consciousness to ourselves when we take the goals and we make them expectations, right? And then we think, oh, I'm not on this platform yet. I'm not on this platform yet, right? We should be realistic. And then when we're realistic as well about that, it also helps us advance better. Because sometimes then people, they will uphold those standards maybe for a few days or even a few weeks, and then they'll think they're on that platform. You often hear this, and not to blaspheme any kirtaniyas or anything, but I always hear kirtaniyas. Sometimes I'll talk to them and they're not studying Prabhupada's books, right? And they'll say, oh, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, he was illiterate. He could not read, right? But how did he learn? He learned by chanting the holy name. But the thing is, until and unless you're chanting the holy name at the level that Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj was chanting it, then maybe you should still read Prabhupada's books, right? When you're chanting Shuddha Nam on his level, then you can. Anyways, that's a little side note, right? Devotees like that, they're to be held as goals, not expectations. Expectations we will read more about in Nectar of Instruction. That's when we can get an idea. Okay. So what other things do we hear in text 48?
Severe penances?
Severe penances, yes. And of course, all of these I'm mentioning because sometimes devotees will genuinely think of these as qualifications, right? I have done Nirjala Ekadashi, so therefore I will have Krishna Prem tomorrow, right? Of course, Nirjala Ekadashi was no one even does it correctly these days. And it's not even a severe penance. It's what everyone did in Vedic society before, but Kali Yuga, what to do. Now we see it as a severe penance. But people will think this way, I fasted so much and then naturally, so on and so forth. Bhakti-siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he told his book distributor disciples to eat rice on Ekadashi, if it meant that they would be more fired up in their book distribution. They were all being very lazy in their book distribution. They were tired and they're saying, oh, we're fasting, Guru Maharaj. And then Saraswati Thakur, he said, then eat rice. Right? Why? Because the whole reason we do any penance or anything is in order to better serve Krishna, right? The penances are, any penance that we do, any austerity that we do, and again, the austerities we do are so small, right? Fasting once a fortnight, having paneer sabji and quinoa is not exactly the worst austerity in the universe, right? All of these austerities are not that bad, right? But the ones we do, we don't do it in order to qualify for anything. We do simply to deepen ourselves in our bhakti. Okay. And again, studying the Vedas, performing sacrifice, giving charity. I'm making the point that these are all good things. These aren't bad things. But in of themselves, they have no devotional value. And often we can get confused. That's why I'm going through this list very slowly. I think it's a very important list for us to internalize. Okay, what else is there? There's one more. Okay, I'll just say it because it's pious activities. Okay, And this is the standard one. I'm a good person. I'm doing the right thing. You know, I go to the temple every week. I'm a good person, right? I still remember one of the, I was talking to one devotee youth, and he was telling me, or they were telling me that, you know, oh, you know, when I come to the temple for Sunday feast, it's difficult to follow the regular principles. It's difficult to chant. Krishna will understand. I said, yeah, he will understand. He'll understand that you're in Maya. So we have this idea, oh, you know, I'll do some good thing. I'll do some right thing. I'll do what's expected of me, right? I'll do what's expected of me. I'll be a nice citizen, right? I'll be a pious, nice person. No, this will not. The only thing, does anyone know? Chaitanya Charitamrita says there's only one thing that can actually give us prema bhakti in its fullness. Does anyone know what it is? This is, again, sorry, sometimes I ask questions that are a bit harder than Bhakti-śāstrī. Does anyone know?
Harinam?
Harinam, yeah, like these are all technically correct, but this isn't the specific thing that was listed in Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Is it service to the Guru?
Service to the Guru is good, but this isn't the specific point. Like these are all true. It's one of those classic "who is the greatest devotee" question, right? You'll say multiple options. Sorry?
I'm going from Prema Bhakti Yaha Hoite Avijja Vinasajate.
Yeah, which is of course very valid. But there's another thing. It's listed in Rai Ramananda Sambhava. Okay, I won't embrace local silence too long for this point because it's not revision. Greed, right? Greed is the only thing that's listed as the only qualification. When one has greed for prema bhakti, then they will have it, right? When one has that greed, where do we get that greed? We get that greed from the pure devotee. We get that greed from Harinam. Okay, so all of you are correct. But the specific link that said for one to get the fullness of bhakti, one needs greed for it. Greed is the only qualification. So yeah, I always say Chaitanya Charitamrita is the most fun you'll ever have with your life. So deep, right? So deep the points are. But greed, when one has a greed that I wish to become a devotee and everything else can burn, right? I'm willing to throw everything else out the window if it means that I can have love for Krishna, then one is qualified, right? All of these other things don't count. Devaki Mataji, she was speaking to some Matajis who are new to Krishna consciousness. It was like a small little satsang. And I was there because I didn't get the memo there is a Mataji only thing. So I was there as well, right? And she was speaking really, she's very conservative. If those of you who don't know, she's very conservative, especially on gender roles and all. A little bit more conservative than I am, but of course I still very much respect and revere her perspective, right? And so she was speaking all of these things, and you could tell they were a little bit confronting for these people who are new to Krishna consciousness to hear these very conservative gender roles, right? And then at the end, you know, she kept on and she did a really wonderful defense. You could see all of them were really, at the end, they were accepting it, but they were still clearly, you could see on their faces, they were challenged by hearing these things, right? And she made this point. She said, at the end of the day, what we don't need to follow this rule or that rule. We need greed for Krishna bhakti. If we have the greed, then we will make progress. Right? She made this point. So she said, all of these things that I've said are good, they're favorable. And studying the Vedas, right? And doing some sort of pious activities, yeah, they can be favorable. They put us in the mode of goodness, right? But they are not the ultimate thing. The ultimate thing is the greed and desire for Krishna bhakti. Does this make sense? So she was making this point. If you feel challenged by this, then don't worry. Just have that desire for bhakti and it'll all work itself out. Okay, so then let's go now to text 53 and let's see 53's list. We should be able to go quickly because it's very similar.
Vedas, penance, charity,
yes,
and worship.
I'm not actually going to write it because it's all of the same ones, right? So we're making the same point here. And so I'm doing this to make the point that Krishna is not being repetitive. He is describing the two different forms, but neither one of them can be understood in any other way, right? Now we might find there's only one that's different in text 53 compared to text 48. Who can tell me what is the one word that is different?
Worship.
Or at least the one word I've noticed.
Worship.
Worship, right? That's a little interesting. So I'm going to put worship just here. Worship, why is worship mentioned in here? Srila Prabhupada, he's making that point that I was making in regards to pious activities, not pious, pious activities, right? Pious activities, going to the temple every once in a while. So Srila Prabhupada is saying, not just by going to the temple, right? Officially go to the temple to offer worship. We see this, right? The number one time we see this is with politicians. I thought it's been too long since I've done my politician bashing, so we can have some now. Politicians, they will come to the temples and they will visit, right? Of all the different parties, right? And they come and they'll give some sort of talk or whatever. And maybe they'll offer a lamp or something, you know, or whatever, right? But is this bhakti? Is this some qualification for them to see the supreme form of the Lord? No, right? We see this official worship. People will do it because they feel the obligation. And then got doned. What does doned mean?
He got dunned.
Oh, dunned. Sorry. I should, yeah, go back to school. No, Trent Zimmerman is who I was thinking about. I just didn't want to make a political comment because this applies to every politician who visits, not any specific party. But, you know, they'll come and they'll say, you know, religion is very nice, religion is very good. And I saw his talk, you know, he gave Bhagavatam class at the end. I don't know if you all saw the Bhagavatam class he gave. It wasn't actually Bhagavatam class. He was just giving a few words, you know, religion is very important. So vote for me, you know. I've come here to offer a lamp, so vote for me, right? That was the whole, you know, that was the whole pava, right? And you see this no matter all over the world, also in Bhaktivedanta Manor, that guy who's running to be the new prime minister in the Conservative Party, sort of tuffle, anyways, old Prajalpa, but he went there as well, right? And he did the same thing, right? Maybe there's some sort of worship there. Who knows? I can't say it clearly, right? But by and large, we see the politician path is there. We'll find different examples as well, right? We'll see people do it all the time. Lots of children do this, right? Children of devotee, especially devotee children, you know. I'm sure any of the devotee children can relate. Even if you are serious now, there's a lot of times in your life where you're like, okay, I have to turn up to Sunday now. I'm going to say Gora Arti. I don't know what it means. And then I'll make my parents happy. I'll clap and then we'll go home, right? This is official worship. This is not worship that is felt in the heart. So this would be another example. I'm sure we can all relate to this as well. Okay. So with this we can understand what is meant by worship. And that's why I've listed worship as the one individual one. Why is worship listed individually? I don't want to speculate, but my personal realization at least is that worship is added here because now we're discussing again the two-armed form, right? Worship is not really something that comes to mind too often when somebody's talking about trying to see the universal form. Then people doing penances, austerities. But with the two-armed form, people will think of worship, right? And so then I come back to the example of that youth who I was talking to, right? He said, oh, Krishna will understand. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, right? But this is not it. Worship like that in this formal way, or even worship as a transaction. I remember I was reading one Christian author, Charles Spurgeon. He's very, very famous. They call him the Prince of Preachers. And he was very talented in speaking. But he was writing in his personal journal how he feels about his prayer life when he prays, right? And he said, for me, praying is like going to the bank. I turn up, I say what I need, I get it, and I leave. 5 minutes done. Any longer, and I'm wasting my time, right? And I was thinking, this is a good example, right? Official worship. This will not get us darshan of Krishna. Okay, I've ranted on enough about this point. With Krishna's mercy, we will start chapter 12 today. Oh yes, Srikanta Sena Prabhu has a question.
So is the implication that worship is there in 53 but not in 48 means by worship you can see the Virat Rupa?
Oh no, my understanding is the implication, and again, this is my philosophical speculation, if you will. The implication is that no one's really trying to see the Virat Rupa through worship. Right?
Ah, okay. Yep, understood. Yep.
Yeah. That's my understanding of the implication. There might be some better understanding of that, but that's at least from my study of the Gita. That's sort of what I pulled together. You don't really see anyone chanting Hare Krishna in order to see the Virat Rupa, right?
Yeah.
In a sense you do, but they're treating it like a Vedic sacrifice if they do, and then it falls into the, but no one's saying I'm going to Bhakti in order to see the universal form. And if you are, please stop.
Can you explain the word by worship, ijaya? I have not seen that used.
Yeah, neither have I. I'd have
Okay.
to look in the Sanskrit dictionary. Prabhupada endorsed Monier Williams as a good Sanskrit dictionary for your own study, but I would recommend at least doing a bit of formal training in Sanskrit before using Monier Williams, because it's a little confusing, because he just lists everything. It's not the best Sanskrit dictionary, but that's the one Prabhupada recommended. So that's what I can get away with recommending here. But I'll check after the class. If I forget, please remind me. I'm very terrible with following things up. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So then let's move on to text 54. Let's have Rohan K can say the English. Bhaktyatvananyaya shakya aham eva vidhorjuna gyatum drashtum cha tatvena praveshtum cha parantapa.
My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding.
Jai. So here we find what was being implicit this whole time is now being made explicit. Again, some people sometimes wonder, what is this chapter doing in the Bhakti section? It would make sense if it's in the Karma section, right? The first 6 chapters. It would make sense if it's in the Jnana section, the last 6 chapters. Why is the universal form in the Bhakti chapters, right? And it is in these texts that we find it. And this was the point that I was trying to make earlier. The 11th chapter completes itself in its conclusion. That's how it shows its relevance to Bhakti, because it shows all of these things. And what is the whole point of the universal form being shown? The whole point is, oh, become a devotee, right? We've seen this building up so far, right? When we see the universal form, it's not so obvious, but already the whole past 10 shlokas or so, how have we been understanding them? We've been understanding them as those implicit glorifications of specifically the 2-armed form of the Lord and of Bhakti Yoga in order to understand the universal form, let alone the superior 2-armed form. Okay, that's why this is here. So there's 2 reasons. One, it works better in the flow. The 11th chapter is here to show the flow. It's showing the realization of what we've discussed in chapter 10, which is the Tattva of Krishna, but also because it's glorifying Bhakti very, very strongly. Of course, the whole Gita is glorifying Bhakti strongly, but these middle 6 chapters are very direct about it. I was talking to Alex Prabhu, and he was saying, he was telling me that reading these middle 6 chapters, it almost feels like the triumphant victory march, right? In the first 6 chapters, we've worked very hard to establish Bhakti is supreme, and these middle 6 chapters are like, we don't care, we're victorious. This is, Bhakti is what it is, right? It's very, it's trumpets it out, right? And I found that was a very good description. And we can miss that in the 11th chapter if we don't realize that the real essence of it comes right at the end. The end interprets everything we've seen already. Does that make sense? Okay, so what do we hear? Oh, my dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understandings. Okay. So Krishna now, he's very explicitly saying this, right? He's saying only through devotional service. And again, this isn't a case like the first 6 chapters where it's Buddhi Yoga and we're translating it as devotional service. Oh, my favorite is when Prabhupada translates Karma Yoga as Bhakti Yoga, right? It's not like this. What does Krishna say? Bhaktiya. And I say this, you can underline it. If you're ever in a debate, it's just so obvious that Bhakti is being here. This isn't our sectarian interpretation. This is the Bhagavad-gītā as it is. After describing all of this, he's saying Bhaktiya, right? This isn't some vague term. He's not saying through yoga or through anything else. He's saying Bhaktiya. I was reading, I don't know if I told you all of this. I was reading an academic translation of the Bhagavad-gītā published by the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. Did I tell you all of this point? I was reading this in my own spare time just because that's what I do in my spare time. So I was reading it in my spare time. And as I was reading through, I found it really interesting because I was reading the commentary, and every time they quote Shankaracharya, they say, the person who wrote this, and this is an academic one, so they have to be neutral. So it's not like he's trying to prove any philosophical point. He's just trying to give an academic perspective. He says, it is perhaps possible that Shankaracharya read his philosophy into the text rather than reading his philosophy out of the text. Do we get the distinction? Shankaracharya's comments often, he already has his idea, and then he changes the text to match with the idea, right? And really interestingly, this scholar, Nicholas Sutton, right, he's a professor at Oxford University, he writes in his introduction, he writes recommendations for other translations. And he says if one wants to get the best and most accessible translation in English, written from a traditional perspective, meaning of course coming through parampara, one should read the Bhagavad-gītā as it is, right? So all that I'm saying is, it's not just Hare Krishna devotees who are saying this, right? Even in the academic sphere, you'll see people say this. Okay, so we're not really reading anything into the text. It's quite literally saying, through undivided bhakti, one can understand this. And in that way, you can understand all of these things, not through all of these other methods. Again, here we find the yoga ladder. Okay, I'm about to go on to our activity. So the purport to 55, the purport to 55 has a very nice, well, it is a very nice purport. It's a very long one as well. In this purport, and you can also feel free to go to text 54. I'll recite the Sanskrit for 55 before we do the activity. I'm going to break you into 2 rooms, just because there's not too many of us, so 2 rooms of 6. And if we can all go through the purport and write down the specific instructions that have been given and maybe mind map them, right? So if you can mind map the instructions, how they relate to each other. Because text 55, which I'm about to recite, text 55 gives several instructions and Prabhupada elaborates upon all of them, right? So if you can mind map it out in each group, that'll be the activity. Okay, we will miss you, Tarun Prabhu and Shabina Mataji, but yeah, we will go ahead with the activity without you. Please, yeah, have fun picking up the kids. I'll just recite the Sanskrit then for text 55, and then we'll do that activity to wrap up today. Maybe we can have, who have I not asked? Oh, Katyayani Mataji has raised her hand. Katyayani Mataji can say the English for text 55. Mat karma krin mat paramo mad bhakta sangavarjitaha nirvaira sarva bhuteshu yasamameti pandava.
Translation. My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, he who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. Thank you, Prabhu.
Jai. Jai. So we can see here, again, the triumphant sort of conclusion. It is very clear this chapter is about Bhakti Yoga, right? And it's just so very, very explicit. And so Krishna now, he concludes by giving this a formula. This is what the Mayapur Institute calls it, the formula of Krishna consciousness, right? We find a few places where there is a formula of Krishna consciousness, but here we find one. And before I'll stop talking now, I'll split you into your 2 groups. I hope that activity makes sense. You've all done a mind map before, right? This isn't a foreign concept. So one of you can draw the mind map, and then the other of you can read through the purport, maybe split the purport into chunks because it is a long purport. And we'll meet again exactly at 12, if that's all right with everyone. Or we can meet 2 minutes before 12. No, let's meet at 12 so you all have a good amount of time. Okay, I'll make the breakout rooms now.
The main 5 being bhakti must be performed purely. The work of bhakti must be for Krishna. The devotee must be friendly to all. Krishna must be the goal of life, and bhakti must be free from karma and jnana. And reading through the purport, we found a few more bits that come off each one, though not all of them have been filled out yet.
Jai, very nice. Okay, now Srikanta Sena Prabhu, do you want to share what you've done? And also, I mean, feel free to fill it out further, but I always like it when we share the whatever we've done in the WhatsApp group.
We kind of just spoke to each paragraph like.
Did you do the transcription?
Sort of. I just took points, but I think everyone summarized each of their points really well. So I don't know if you'd want to talk to yours first, Mrinal, and then I can talk to mine, and then Shivam. Is that?
Yeah, sure. So I had Krishna Karma as the first paragraph. And so the first point was doing work for Krishna. Second one is to not be attached to the results of work. And the third one being offered the results to Krishna. And it all just summarized 3.9. Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Mine was Matparama and I think it was Madhbhakta. So Matparama is one who doesn't want to go to the heavenly planets and one that wants to go to Goloka Vrindavan only. They have no desire to go to, they just want to enter the spiritual sky. And also Madhbhakta is one who is fully engaged in devotional service. So specifically in the 9 processes of devotional engagements, that's hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, serving, offering prayers.
So my one was Sangha Varjita, and so the points that I had was in the purport it says that we should disassociate from non-devotees, from people who are attracted to fruitive activities, and from people that are constantly involving in mental speculation. Then we should also be free from all kinds of material contamination. And you should also act favorably for Krishna. The example that was given was of Kamsa, who acts unfavorably, as he was also in Krishna consciousness, but it was all unfavorable to Krishna just because he was trying to kill him. And then Krishna returns that to him by killing him and then giving him salvation. But that's not the goal of devotees. The goal of devotees is to serve. So yeah.
And our point is about the Nirvairaha. So how devotees of Lord Krishna are friendly to everyone. They're very friendly to all the living entities. And then they understand Krishna consciousness is the only solution to all the problems. So because they personally experience that, and therefore they want to give this knowledge to everyone, and like so compassionate to distribute this knowledge to the human society. The examples given in the purport are like Jesus Christ, Das Thakura, and then Prahlad Maharaj. So they take up all the inconveniences just to spread this Krishna consciousness to the world.
Srikanta Sena Prabhu?
Yeah, so surrender unto me doesn't really mention any, that it's all really covered, but Prabhupada's last paragraph is very sweet because it mentions that the purpose of this chapter is to show that Lord Krishna's form as Shyamsundar is essential, and was the word is used, essential and supreme. And so essentially all of these practical applications of bhakti enable us to have a relationship with the personal aspect of the divine Krishna and go closer towards him as the ultimate goal. So if one has the desire, as Prabhu said before, that greed, labhda, to have a personal relationship with the Lord, one naturally engages in this process as stated in this verse.
Jai, I think, is that everyone in your group? Yeah, Jai, very nice, and a wonderful breakdown of each part of the purport. That's one of those famous purports. The most famous purport, of course, is the Bhagavatam 1111. But yes, a very famous purport. So yeah, and break it down very nicely. That is a learning outcome that we want to have you all really break down this formula. There's a few times where Krishna just gives a perfect formula for Krishna consciousness. This text is one of them. So with that, we've concluded our study of the 11th chapter. Again, my apologies for going over time. You know I hate to do it, but again, we missed out on the class last week. So I wanted to do a bit of a recap before the class, and that's why we've gone a little bit over time. You've all finished the 12th chapter in your homework, I'm pretty sure. So I think just memorize shlokas, just because we're getting close to the test, and the shlokas for this module are particularly bad. Not bad, but you know, like there's a lot of them. So I would say homework, I'm just going to let you guys memorize your shlokas before the shloka test, because we're getting close to that. So that's the homework before next week. If you really want to overachieve, which I'd love, maybe reread the first half of chapter 12 just to get it fresh in your head. But I'd rather everyone just focuses on their shloka tests. I don't want to have to fail anyone. We got pretty close in some cases last test, and I don't I really wouldn't want to have to do that. So let's have everyone grind out your shlokas, and if you can, read the first half of chapter 12, but no pressure. And then I'll see some of you on Saturday. As I said, I won't take an attendance mark next week because it'd be unfair for me to ask you to come on a Saturday and then you can't. But I don't want to lose another class just because of we've already lost it for Janmashtami and everything. And then please watch recording. So I'll either see you next week or I'll see you the week after. Okay, Hare Krishna. And if I don't see you on next Saturday, have a happy Radhashtami. And if I do, I'll tell you to have a happy Radhashtami then. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Srimad Bhagavad-gītā ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.